Hey, Bright Lights, it's Angela Mazzi, and welcome back to Space Doctor. This is the place where I break down the science behind design for well-being, aka salutogenesis. This is something that, as an architect, I've spent my whole career researching and implementing in many of my projects, and I want to make this easy and fun for all of you because design really does make a difference. Whether you are an architect or an interior designer and want to have better spaces for your clients, or you're just somebody looking to understand more about how design might be affecting you or your loved ones, you come to the right place. Each week, I draw cards from my Salutogenesis deck that are designed to give you prompts as you go through your week, just to help you think about using space or designing space a little bit differently. And don't forget to like and subscribe so that you get notifications every time I publish a new video. The deck is divided into two sections. There are foundational concepts of well-being that get into physiology, biology, psychology, sociology, even economics. And then there are the 5 aspects of salutogenesis, which each specifically deal with a theory related to well-being. So we have sense of coherence, self-efficacy, prospect and refuge, biophilia, and relaxation response. So I will draw one card from each section of the deck, and then we'll talk about what those two things mean together. So this is a really fun way to mix and match these concepts and really get you thinking about things in a different way each week. Now, I've shuffled the cards and drawn them, and the card we have from the foundational concepts section is equity, which, as you can see, is represented by a pizza that is actually made up of completely different slices, different kinds of toppings, different kinds of recipes, but they all make pizza. They all matter. They're all part of the equation. The card that I drew from the aspects section of the deck comes from sense of coherence, which is about how meaningful, manageable, and comprehensible our environment is. Essentially, how we understand and navigate space. And as you can see, this card depicts a really big space, but the scale of the space is broken down by the archways that form a colonnade, by the light fixtures, and by objects that we can see in the space that not only mark our progress, because as we get closer to the end of the corridor, we're going to reach those vases that are a halfway point, but we can see things like the stone floor pattern or the bicycle that are of a scale that we know and understand. So it helps us understand better how big the space actually is. And I think when we put these two cards together, we get a really interesting story and something to think about for the week. So let's start with equity. Equity can be racial equity. That's often where a lot of us go. But it can be really about anything that creates a disadvantage in terms of the resources you have available. Think about it. If you got resources, you can live your best life. When you are at a disadvantage because of things like gender, race, financial ability, education, age, sexual orientation, physical ability, any of those things can put you at a disadvantage if the space is not providing you resources. So when we think about these two things together, we really need to think about how we understand, move through, and use space. So if you think about spaces that you use, are you well resourced enough to fully utilize those spaces, or do you struggle Do you know people who struggle because there is not an equitable design? We haven't thought of everybody. And when we design for everybody, we actually make the space a richer, better place, even if you didn't need those extra resources. So think about quality of lighting, think about physical barriers to moving through space or using spaces. We all benefit by the auto door openers or larger handicap stalls or universal restrooms that were put in for people who had physical disabilities. So the space is made better, even though most of us may not need those accommodations. They sure do come in handy. So think about other things. I know both of my parents had physical disabilities towards the end of their lives, and my mother was also legally blind. So it was very easy for her to be disoriented in a space because she couldn't see clearly and she struggled to get around. And that really made things like going shopping an ordeal. She could no longer do things like go to the grocery store. My dad could only go to the grocery store if one of those little mobilized carts were available so that he could travel around the store because he couldn't walk that long distance anymore. So physical disabilities caused them to measure distance with time because it took a lot longer and took a lot more effort for them to get where they needed to go. They needed to stop and rest more often. And sometimes something was just too much to be considered worth it for them to attempt at all. Now, that's not very equitable. So, as you think about your own needs, do you fall into any of these equity categories? And have you noticed yourself or your loved ones at a disadvantage in any particular setting, whether it's a classroom or an athletic event, where it's just too difficult? Maybe you can't enjoy the movie because you can't hear well enough and you need captioning. What are the ways that you or someone you know could be better resourced by environmental accommodations, especially things that provide scale cues? If you are an architect or an interior designer, think about how you can use scale cues in your projects to better orient people, but also to help them move through space in a better way. So that is our prompt for this week, to think through that equity lens and equity in the full spectrum of everything that it means about how scale cues can make it easier or more difficult to navigate their environments. So if you enjoyed this prompt, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. I have new episodes coming every single week. And the goal is just to give you that prompt, give you that inspiration to take with you into the week and think about the built environment around you. I hope a little bit differently. So stay inspired, everyone, and I will see you next time.